I was carrying the box of funeral programs when my sister-in-law pulled my chair away from the family table and said, "Evelyn, spouses sit in the second row." My husband didn't defend me. He slid a pen into my hand and whispered, "Just sign before the service starts." 10 minutes later, the funeral director asked if I knew my SUV's dashcam had recorded what Grant and Tracy said in the parking lot. That was the moment I understood Harold Carter's funeral was not the only thing being arranged that morning. The room smelled of lilies, black coffee, and rain-soaked wool coats. Outside the tall front windows, the Pennsylvania sky hung low and gray, pressing against the funeral home like it wanted to listen. I stood there in my navy dress, still holding the cardboard box against my ribs, while Tracy Carter stared at me as if I had wandered into the wrong meeting by accident. "Second row," she repeated, softer this time, like she was doing me a favor by not embarrassing me louder. The chair she had pulled away scraped across the carpet with a dull, ugly sound. It should not have hurt as much as it did. It was just a chair. Dark wood, padded seat, one of 6 arranged around the little planning table where the family was supposed to review the order of service. But after 4 years of washing Harold's sheets, crushing his pills into applesauce, driving him to appointments in sleet and summer heat, and sleeping in the recliner beside him when his breathing turned rough, that chair felt like a verdict. Grant stood by the window, one hand in his pocket, the other wrapped around his phone. His black suit looked expensive and newly pressed. Mine had been steamed in the bathroom at 6 that morning while I listened for the kettle and checked the folder of documents Harold had asked me to keep safe. "Grant," I said, waiting for him to look at me. He did, but only for a second. "Evelyn," he murmured, tired and flat, "please don't make this difficult." Difficult. That word had followed me for years. It appeared whenever I asked why Tracy only visited when someone from church was dropping off a casserole. It appeared whenever Grant said he had a late meeting instead of coming with me to the hospital. It appeared whenever Harold's insurance forms confused me and I asked for help, only to be told I was better at that kind of thing anyway. I looked down at the funeral programs in my arms. Harold's picture was on the front, taken 10 years earlier on the porch of the farmhouse, his silver hair combed back, his smile crooked from trying not to laugh. Beneath his name, Tracy had chosen the line, "Beloved father, brother, and friend." Not husband, because Harold had buried his wife 13 years earlier. Not grandfather, because Grant and I never had children. And not one word about the woman who had spent the last 4 years keeping him alive with dignity. I had not expected my name in bold. I had not expected applause. I would have settled for a chair. Tracy took the box from my hands without asking and set it on the sideboard, beside a guest book and a crystal bowl of wrapped mints. Her perfume was sharp, expensive, and too bright for a room full of grief. "We're just trying to keep things clean," she said. I almost laughed. Clean was what she called it when she erased people. The funeral director, Mr. Morris, stood near the doorway with a leather folder pressed to his chest. He was a tall, careful man in his early 60s, with silver glasses and the calm posture of someone who had spent decades guiding families through their worst hours. His eyes moved from Tracy's hand on the chair to Grant's face, then to me. He noticed. I could tell. But funerals teach everyone in the room to wait one breath longer than usual. Grant stepped closer and placed a thin stack of papers on the table. The top page had a yellow sticky note, marking a signature line. I saw my name typed in the middle of a sentence I did not understand. Evelyn Carter acknowledges. Tracy tapped the line with one price sting. "It's just housekeeping," she said. "Estate housekeeping. We need it done before the service starts so Rebecca doesn't have to chase you down afterward." Rebecca was Harold's lawyer. I had spoken to her twice on the phone, both times when Harold was still alive, and wanted to make sure Evelyn knows where things are. Grant had hated those calls. He always left the room when Rebecca's name appeared on my screen. I stared at the paper. A few words jumped out at me before my mind could make sense of them. Residential claim. Transition of occupancy. Waiver. My fingers went cold. "Why would I sign anything today?" I asked. Grant's jaw tightened. Tracy's mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Because today is about Dad," Grant said. "Not about you. There are sentences that do not sound cruel until you hear who is saying them." I looked at the man I had married 21 years earlier, the man who once kissed flour from my cheek in our first apartment, The man who cried into my shoulder when his mother died. The man who promised Harold he would never let me carry everything alone. Then he picked up the pen. Not roughly. Not dramatically. Just with the quiet confidence of someone who assumed I would do what I had always done. Smooth the room, swallow the insult, protect his image. He pressed the pen into my hand and folded my fingers around it. Just sign before the service starts, he whispered. The words moved through me slowly, like cold water under a door. Behind him, mourners began arriving in the lobby. I heard low voices, the rustle of coats, someone crying softly near the guest book. The world was doing what the world does around grief, moving carefully, speaking gently, pretending everyone inside a funeral home is softened by loss. But Grant was not softened. Tracy was not grieving. They were working. I set the pen down. The small click it made against the table seemed to irritate Tracy more than any argument could have. Evelyn, she said, lowering her voice. Don't embarrass yourself today. My face warmed, but I kept my hands still. Harold used to tell me that a steady hand made people nervous when they expected you to shake. I learned that from him during the second winter of his illness. Back then, the farmhouse smelled of menthol rub, chicken broth, and the old cedar chest in the hallway. Harold had started needing help standing from his recliner, though he hated admitting it. Grant said he could not handle seeing his father that way. Tracy said the drive from Harrisburg was too far with her schedule. So I became the schedule. Monday pills in the blue case. Tuesday physical therapy. Thursday cardiology. Soft eggs when chewing hurt. Flannel sheets when his joints ached. The good mug with the chipped rim because Harold said coffee tasted better from something that had survived a few things. On the nights he could not sleep, he would call my name from the living room, embarrassed every time. Sorry, Evie, he would say. I know you need rest. And I would tell him the same thing every time. We'll get through the night first. Rest can wait. That was how caregiving worked. You did not become noble. You became practical. You learned which floorboards creaked, which pharmacy answered fastest, which blanket warmed in the dryer without burning his thin skin. You learned to hear fear underneath complaints. You learned to measure pain by the way someone refused dessert. Grant learned to text, running late. Tracy learned to post old photos of Harold on Facebook with captions about family. I learned how to lift him without hurting his shoulder. One night, after a hospital discharge that stretched past midnight, rain hit the windshield so hard I could barely see the yellow lines. Harold sat beside me wrapped in a blanket, still wearing the paper bracelet from the emergency room. My eyes burned from exhaustion. 2 days later, a small box appeared on the kitchen table. A Dashcam. Harold had ordered it without telling me. If you're going to keep saving this family, he said, pretending to read the instruction manual, the least I can do is make sure the road doesn't swallow you whole. I laughed then. I actually laughed. The kind of laugh that catches you off guard because you have been tired too long. He made Grant install it, though Grant complained the whole time about wiring and settings and unnecessary gadgets. Harold just sat in his recliner and watched. Do it right, he said. She does everything else right. That dashcam stayed in my SUV through snowstorms, pharmacy runs, grocery trips, and the final drive home from the hospice center with Harold's empty seat beside me. That morning at the funeral home, I had parked near the side entrance because Mr. Cumbad, Morris told me it would be easier to bring in the programs that way. I had left the SUV in accessory mode for a minute while I gathered the box, the side door not fully shut because the cardboard corner had caught on the seatbelt. I did not think about the dashcam. Not when Tracy pulled my chair away. Not when Grant put the pen in my hand. Not when I felt, for one humiliating second, like maybe they were right and I had only imagined belonging to this family. Then Mr. Morris appeared in the doorway again. He did not interrupt loudly. He did not accuse anyone. He simply looked at me with the grave politeness of a man who had seen enough family ugliness to recognize when grief was being used as cover. Mrs. Carter, he said, may I speak with you in the hall for a moment? Tracy's head snapped toward him. We're in the middle of something, she said. Mr. Morris did not move his eyes from me. I believe it concerns Mrs. Carter's vehicle. Grant frowned. Her vehicle? I felt the room shift. Not much. Just enough. Mr. Morris stepped aside, making room for me to pass. My legs felt strange beneath me as I walked toward the hallway. Behind me, Tracy whispered Grant's name in a sharp little hiss. He did not answer. The lobby was filling now. A cousin I barely knew touched my elbow and said she was sorry for my loss. I nodded because that was what women like me are trained to do, even while something inside us is cracking open. Mr. Morris led me past the guest book, past the framed landscape paintings, toward a quiet alcove near the side entrance where rain streaked the glass. He lowered his voice. "Is the gray SUV yours?" "Yes," I said. "The one with the dash camera mounted below the rearview mirror?" My throat tightened. "Yes." He glanced back toward the planning room, then at me again. "I think you should check whether it recorded audio from the parking lot a few minutes ago," he said carefully, "before you sign anything." For a moment, all I could hear was the rain. Then, from the planning room, Tracy's voice rose just enough to reach the hall. "She always does this," she said. "She makes everything about herself." Mr. Morris did not react. I reached into my purse with fingers that no longer felt like mine and pulled out my phone. The Dashcam app took 6 seconds to open. 6 seconds can feel like an entire marriage when you already know the life you trusted is about to change. The latest clip was sitting at the top. Parking mode recording. Cool. 17 a.m. The thumbnail showed the wet funeral home lot, Grant's black shoes near the bumper, Tracy's red umbrella tilted toward him like a secret. I pressed play. The first sound was rain. Not voices yet. Just rain ticking against the hood of my SUV and the soft electronic hum of the dashcam adjusting itself. On the tiny screen, the parking lot looked warped through beads of water. Grant's shoes appeared first near the bumper, polished black leather on wet pavement. Then Tracy's red umbrella tilted into frame. I could have let the clip play right there in the hallway. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to hear the worst quickly, the way you rip a bandage from skin just to stop imagining the pain. But another part of me, the older part, the part Harold had helped build back up over 4 hard years, knew better. Proof needed a steady hand. So I paused the video, locked my phone, and looked at Mr. Morris. "Not here," I whispered. He nodded once, as if he understood that some truths are too sharp to hold in public before you have wrapped your fingers around them properly. From the planning room, Grant called my name. Not worried. Annoyed. "Evelyn?" The tone landed in my chest with a familiar weight. I had heard that voice in hospital corridors, kitchen doorways, and the dim blue light of 3 in the morning. It was the voice Grant used when he believed I had taken too long feeling something. I slipped my phone back into my purse. "Thank you," I told Mr. Morris. His expression did not change, but his voice softened. "Mrs. Carter, you don't have to sign anything you don't understand." It was such a simple sentence. Any stranger could have said it. Any decent husband should have. I walked back toward the room with the smell of lilies thick in my throat. When I entered, Tracy had already rearranged the table as if my absence had been an inconvenience. The programs were stacked in neat piles beside the guest book. The papers were back in the center, lined up perfectly with the pen placed across the signature line. My chair was still missing. Grant stood behind the chair he had saved for himself, his hand resting on the top of it. Tracy had taken the seat beside him. There was one open chair at the far wall near the coat rack, half hidden behind a potted peace lily. That was where they expected me to sit. A second-row chair before the service had even begun. "Everything okay with your car?" Grant asked. His eyes flicked to my purse. I noticed it. So did Tracy. "Fine," I said. Tracy leaned back, folding her hands. "Good. Then we can finish this." Finish this. As if I were the last loose end before Harold could be buried politely. I looked at the papers again. The top page seemed harmless if you only glanced at it. Formal phrases. Estate language. Words designed to sound cleaner than what they meant. But my eyes kept catching on the same pieces. Waiver. Occupancy. No further claim. My pulse beat slowly in my ears. "What exactly am I waiving?" I asked. Tracy gave a small laugh through her nose. "Oh, Evelyn. Please don't start picking apart legal words today." Grant rubbed his forehead. "It just confirms you understand Dad's house is part of the estate process." Dad's house, I repeated. For 21 years, Grant had called it the farmhouse. When Harold got sick, It became your father's place whenever bills needed paying, and Dad's house whenever family came to visit. In the last year, when Harold started telling me where he kept receipts and keys and warranty papers, Grant had started calling it complicated. Now it was Dad's house again. Clean. Sentimental. Convenient. I sat down in the chair by the wall because my legs needed something beneath them. Tracy's mouth twitched, like she had won a small victory. That was her mistake. She had always thought humiliation worked because it pushed people down. She never understood that sometimes it only gives them a better view of the room. From where I sat, I could see Grant's left hand shaking. Just slightly. I could see Tracy's purse half open on the table, the corner of another document folder inside it. I could see Mr. Morris through the glass panel in the door, speaking quietly with an older cousin near the guest book, but keeping his body angled toward us. And I could see Harold's photograph on the program. That smile. That stubborn, crooked smile. 4 years earlier, when Harold first moved in with us after his second fall, Grant promised it would be temporary. Just until we find the right care plan, he said, standing in the hallway while I cleared out the downstairs den. Dad won't want to feel like a burden. Harold had heard him from the living room. I already feel like one, he called out. At least let me be a burden near the good coffee. I laughed. Grant did not. Back then, I still believed exhaustion could be shared evenly if you loved someone enough. I thought Grant would learn the medication schedule. I thought Tracy would come on weekends. I thought family meant everyone moved closer to the weight. Instead, people praised us in public and disappeared in private. At church, Tracy would squeeze Harold's shoulder and say, "We're all taking such good care of him." Then she would leave before the dishes were done. Grant would stand beside me at the pharmacy counter, looking solemn while neighbors asked how his father was doing. He had a gift for grief before grief even arrived. He knew when to lower his eyes. He knew when to sigh. He knew when to say, "We're taking it day by day," as if he knew what Harold ate for breakfast or which pills made him dizzy. But at home, when Harold's hands trembled too badly to button his shirt, Grant found reasons to be upstairs. When Harold needed help bathing, Grant suddenly had calls. When Harold grew embarrassed and angry and snapped at me for cutting his toast wrong, Grant said, "You're better with him than I am. I was not better. I was there. There is a difference." Harold knew it. He noticed when Grant forgot appointments. He noticed when Tracy kissed his forehead in front of visitors, but never stayed long enough to hear the hard parts. He noticed when I learned to place his water glass on the left because his right hand stiffened by evening. He noticed when I stopped buying my favorite tea because the medical copays had gone up again. One afternoon, about a year before he died, I found him in the kitchen trying to write a check with fingers that would not obey him. His face was red with frustration. "Let me help," I said. "No," he snapped. So I stopped. I stood there and waited, because dignity matters most when someone has the least control over it. After a minute, his shoulders dropped. "I hate this," he whispered. I know. He looked at me then, really looked at me, with those pale blue Carter eyes Grant had inherited but never used the same way. "They don't see what you do," he said. I tried to brush it off. "They're busy. Busy is not blind," he said. That was Harold. Gentle when he wanted to be. Sharp when truth required it. A week later, he asked me to drive him to Rebecca Sloane's office. Grant thought it was for an insurance update. Tracy thought it was about prepaid burial arrangements. Harold told them both exactly enough to keep them uninterested. On the drive home, he was quiet. I remember the late afternoon sun through the windshield, the smell of winter leaves caught in the vents, his thin hands folded over the envelope Rebecca had given him. "Evie," he said finally, "when the time comes, don't let them rush you." I glanced at him. Rush me about what? Anything with a signature. At the time, I thought he meant medical forms. Maybe funeral decisions. Maybe the ordinary paperwork that piles up around dying like dust. Now, sitting in that funeral home chair near the coat rack while Tracy tapped the pen against the table, I understood that Harold had been warning me from farther down the road. "Evelyn," Grant said. I blinked and came back to the room. He had moved closer. Not enough to seem threatening to anyone watching, but enough to make the space smaller. His cologne mixed with coffee and lilies, a clean, expensive scent that made the room feel colder. "Dad trusted us to handle this smoothly," he said. "No," I said before I could soften it. Harold trusted me not to be rushed. Tracy's eyes narrowed. There it was. The tiny crack in her polished grief. Harold was confused near the end, she said. I looked at her. She said it too quickly. Too ready. Grant's face tightened, but he did not stop her. My father had good days and bad days, he said carefully. You know that. I did know that. I knew which mornings his memory slipped. I knew which evenings he mixed up the year. I knew that he sometimes called me by his late wife's name when fever took hold. But I also knew his clear days. I knew the way he still beat Grant at cribbage 2 months before he died. I knew the way he corrected Tracy when she claimed she had visited on Easter. I knew the way he asked Rebecca to call him Harold, not Mr. Carter, because I've been Mr. Carter to enough people who wanted something. He knew what he wanted, I said. Tracy pushed the papers toward me again, harder this time. The stack slid across the table and bumped the edge. Then honor him by not turning his funeral into a scene. A scene. That was another word people used when they wanted obedience to look like maturity. Grant picked up the pen and held it out. Evelyn, please, he said, softening his voice now. He was good at that. We're all grieving. Nobody is trying to hurt you. This just helps us move forward. Move forward. I thought of the Dashcam clip waiting on my phone. Tracy's red umbrella. Grant's polished shoes. The rain. Whatever they had said when they believed I was not listening. My hand stayed in my lap. What happens if I don't sign? I asked. For the first time that morning, neither of them answered immediately. That silence told me more than the papers did. Tracy recovered first. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, her voice low and sharp. Then you make this harder for everyone. You force Grant to deal with the house, the bills, the legal mess, all while burying his father. Is that really who you want to be today? Grant looked down. Not ashamed. Waiting. They had rehearsed this, I realized. Not word for word, maybe, but the rhythm of it. Tracy would shame me. Grant would look wounded. I would feel guilty. Then I would sign because I had spent years confusing peace with love. The old Evelyn might have. The one who wanted to be reasonable. The one who folded every sharp corner of herself so nobody would call her difficult. The one who sat beside Harold's bed at EA.M. and still apologized to Grant if dinner was late. But that woman had heard Mr. Morris say, before you sign anything. That woman had seen the word waiver. That woman had Harold's warning moving through her like a hand on her shoulder. I stood. Tracy's mouth opened. I need a minute, I said. Grant stepped toward the door before I reached it. Where are you going? To listen to something. His eyes went to my purse again. This time, I let him see me notice. Then I walked out before either of them could stop me. I did not go far. Just past the guest book, beyond the framed watercolor of a covered bridge, into the alcove where rain slid down the window in thin silver lines. My reflection looked strange in the glass. Pale face. Navy dress. Hair pinned too tightly. A woman dressed for mourning who had accidentally walked into an ambush. My phone felt heavy in my hand. The clip was still there. Parking mode recording. Ku, Shipchile. M. I pressed play. At first, there was only the rain again, louder this time through the tiny speaker. Then the muffled thump of a car door somewhere nearby. Tracy's red umbrella filled the corner of the frame. Grant stood half out of view, but his voice came through clearly enough to make my stomach turn. Get her signature before the service, Tracy said. There was no grief in her voice. No tremor. No hesitation. Grant exhaled sharply. I'm trying. Trying is not enough. After the burial, people will start feeling sorry for her. You know how Evelyn is. She'll stand there looking wounded, and everyone will forget she's not actually one of us. I felt my fingers tighten around the phone. Not actually one of us. Rain tapped against the window beside me like 100 tiny clocks counting down. Grant's voice came next, low and impatient. She took care of him, Tracy. People know that. She was Dad's nurse, Tracy snapped. Not family. The words did not hit me all at once. They moved through me in pieces. Dad's nurse. Not family. I saw Harold's hands shaking around his coffee mug. I saw the pill organizer on the kitchen counter. I saw myself changing his sheets at midnight because he had been too embarrassed to call Grant. I saw Tracy's Facebook posts about family strength while I scrubbed soup from the stove and tried not to cry into the dishwater. Then Grant laughed. Not loudly, not happily. A tired little laugh, like he was embarrassed by the truth but not sorry for it. Once she signs, I can start over clean, he said. The hallway seemed to tilt. Mr. Morris stood several feet away, giving me privacy while watching the planning room door. I wondered if he could hear it. I wondered if everyone could. I wondered how sound could be so small and still destroy an entire life. Tracy lowered her voice, but the dashcam caught enough. And Dana? My breath stopped. There had been no Dana in any conversation Grant had ever had with me. Grant said something too quiet to catch. Then Tracy replied, I don't care what you told her. Just don't bring her here today. Get Evelyn's signature first. Then you can play Grieving Son for 2 hours and go back to whatever fresh start you think you deserve. Fresh start. Clean. Not family. Every word was a little shovel of dirt over the version of my marriage I had been trying to bury gently. Grant spoke again, clearer now. She'll believe me if I sound broken enough. For a moment, I could not move. I had heard many kinds of cruelty in my life. The loud kind. The careless kind. The kind disguised as advice. But this was different. This was cruelty with a schedule. Cruelty with paperwork. Cruelty wearing a black suit inside a funeral home. I paused the clip. My thumb hovered over the screen. I thought of Harold saying, don't let them rush you. I thought of the way he had made Grant install that dashcam with his own impatient voice from the recliner. Do it right. She does everything else right. I wiped beneath one eye with the heel of my hand and looked at Mr. Morris. Would you come with me? I asked. He did not ask why. Yes, Mrs. Carter. The planning room door was half closed when I reached it. Tracy was standing now, whispering quickly while Grant stared at the floor. The papers had been moved again, stacked tighter, the pen placed on top like bait. When I stepped inside, they both stopped talking. Grant's face rearranged itself first. That was how I knew he had been lying for a long time. The sorrow came too smoothly, like a coat he knew how to button. There you are, he said. We were worried. No, you weren't. My voice surprised me. It was quiet, but it filled the room. Tracy stiffened. Excuse me? I walked to the table and set my phone face down beside the papers. Then I looked at the chair they had taken from me. It was still against the wall, half hidden by that ridiculous peace lily. Move the chair back, I said. Grant blinked. Evelyn, move it back. Tracy gave a short, humorless laugh. This is exactly what I meant. Dad is lying in the next room and you're making this about seating. I turned to her. No, Tracy. You made it about seating when you pulled my chair away. For the first time, she had no immediate answer. Grant stepped in, palms slightly raised, the gesture of a man trying to look gentle for an invisible audience. Evie, let's all take a breath. Nobody called me Evie except Harold. Hearing it in Grant's mouth felt like watching someone steal flowers from a grave. Don't, I said. His hands dropped. I picked up the papers and read the first page again, this time slowly. I did not understand every phrase, but I understood enough. Enough to see they wanted me to say I had no claim to the house. Enough to see they wanted it before anyone else had time to explain what Harold had arranged. Enough to know Harold had been right. Tracy reached for the stack. I moved it away. Her nails clicked against the table. That is not yours to take, she said. Apparently neither was the chair. Grant's jaw tightened. Evelyn, stop. I placed the papers flat in front of me. No, the word was small, almost plain, but it changed the air. Tracy's face hardened. You have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm not doing. I picked up the pen Grant had pushed into my hand. I'm not signing this. Grant stepped closer. You're emotional. I almost smiled then. Not because anything was funny. Because for 4 years, every time they needed my labor, I was dependable. Every time they needed my silence, I was gracious. Every time Harold needed lifting, feeding, cleaning, comforting, I was strong enough. But the second I refused to be useful, I became emotional. I set the pen down again. Then I turned my phone over. The screen lit up. Tracy's eyes flicked toward it, and something in her face changed. A tiny twitch near her mouth. A flash of calculation. Grant saw it too. "What is that?" he asked. "The dashcam." The room went still. Outside the door, voices murmured in the lobby. Someone laughed softly in that guilty way people laugh at funerals when they do not know what else to do with discomfort. Tracy's hand shot toward the phone. I pulled it back before she touched it. "Don't," I said. Grant's voice dropped. "Evelyn, whatever you think you heard," I pressed play. Rain filled the room. For 2 seconds, neither of them moved. Then Tracy's own voice came from the phone, sharp and unmistakable. "Get her signature before the service." Grant lunged not at me, not violently, but fast enough that Mr. Morris stepped forward from the doorway. Grant slapped his palm down near the phone, trying to cover the speaker. I slid it out from under his hand. "Let it play," I said. "Turn that off," Tracy hissed. The clip continued. "After the burial, people will start feeling sorry for her." Tracy grabbed the paperwork, clutching it against her chest as if paper could hide sound. Grant looked at Mr. Morris, then back at me. "This is private family business." Mr. Morris's voice was calm. "Then perhaps everyone should stop trying to conduct it before the service." Tracy's head snapped toward him. "This does not concern you. It concerns Mrs. Carter if she is being asked to sign documents in my facility without proper understanding." Grant's face flushed. "We are not doing this here." He moved toward the door and pushed it with one hand, trying to close it. Mr. Morris placed his palm against the edge and held it open. Not forcefully, just firmly. "This room should stay open," he said. That was when the audio reached the line. "She was Dad's nurse. Not family." The words slipped through the open doorway and into the hall. I saw 3 heads turn in the lobby. A cousin, a neighbor, Harold's old friend from the hardware store. Tracy went pale beneath her makeup. Grant looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time that morning he seemed to understand I was not simply hurt. I was holding proof. "Evelyn," he said, softer now. "You're taking this out of context." I let the clip keep playing. His own voice answered him. "Once she signs, I can start over clean." The silence after that was not empty. It was crowded with every meal I had cooked, every form I had filled out, every night I had told Harold he was safe, every time Grant had kissed my forehead on his way out the door and called me amazing, because amazing was easier than present. Tracy whispered, "Grant." Not because she was sorry. Because she knew they had lost control. Grant reached for my arm. "Can we please talk privately?" I stepped back. "No." The word came easier the second time. His hand fell to his side. From the hallway, someone murmured, "My God." Tracy turned toward the door, her composure cracking. "This family is grieving. Evelyn is upset and confused." I hit pause. Then I looked at every person within earshot. "I am not confused," I said. My voice did not shake. I was asked to sit in the second row at the funeral of the man I cared for. I was handed papers I was told not to read. And I just heard my husband say he wanted my signature so he could start over clean. Grant closed his eyes. Tracy's lips pressed into a hard line. For a few seconds, the only sound was rain and the distant organ music beginning in the chapel. Then a woman's voice came from behind Mr. Morris. "Evelyn?" I turned. Rebecca Sloan stood in the hallway with a black leather briefcase in one hand and a cream envelope in the other. Her gray hair was tucked neatly behind her ears, and her expression carried none of the confusion I expected. Only sadness. And beneath it, recognition. "I'm glad you haven't signed anything," she said. Grant went rigid. Tracy clutched the papers tighter. Rebecca looked at them, then at me. "Harold asked me to bring something for you." For one strange second, nobody moved. Rebecca Sloan stood in the doorway with that cream envelope in her hand, rain shining on the shoulders of her black coat. Behind her, the hallway had gone quiet in the way hallways do, when people are pretending not to listen. A cousin held a tissue halfway to her face. Harold's old friend from the hardware store stared at the floor. Mr. Morris kept one hand on the open door. Grant looked at the envelope like it was a lit match. Tracy found her voice first. "Rebecca," she said, too brightly, "this is not a good time." Rebecca stepped into the room anyway. "No," she said, her voice calm. "It appears this is exactly the time." Tracy's fingers tightened around the papers she had snatched from the table. The edges bent against her palm. Grant reached for her wrist, not gently, not harshly, just quickly enough to remind her they were being watched. "Put those down," Rebecca said. Tracy gave a brittle laugh. "They're family documents. They are unsigned documents," Rebecca replied. "And they do not leave this room." The silence that followed was small but satisfying. Tracy placed the papers on the table as if she had decided to do it herself. Grant turned toward me. His eyes were red now, but I no longer trusted redness. I had seen him look broken in front of nurses, neighbors, and church ladies, then leave me to carry his father up 3 porch steps alone. Grief had become another costume he knew how to wear. "Evelyn," he said, "please. This has gotten out of hand." I looked at the phone in my hand, the paused dashcam clip still glowing on the screen. "No," I said. It finally got into the light. Rebecca's expression softened for half a breath, then she held out the envelope. "Harold asked me to give this to you before the service," she said. "Privately, if possible. But given what I've just heard, I think he would forgive the audience." My hands shook when I took it. Not from fear. Not exactly. It was the kind of shaking that comes when your body realizes it has been bracing for years, and someone finally tells it the weight was real. My name was written across the front in Harold's uneven handwriting. Evie. No one else called me that, without taking something from it. I slid my finger under the flap. The paper inside smelled faintly like the old desk in Harold's room, dust and cedar, and the peppermint candies he hid in the top drawer even after his doctor told him to cut back on sugar. The letter was short. Harold had never used 3 words when one would do. "Evie, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I am sorry I left you to deal with the Carter talent for making simple things ugly. I know what you did. I know who came when people were watching, and who stayed when no one was. Grant is my son. Tracy is my daughter. I love them because that is what fathers do, but love has never required me to be blind. You were the one who stayed. You drove me through storms. You learned my medicines. You let me be angry without making me feel ashamed. You gave an old man the mercy of being cared for without being treated like a burden. I have made arrangements with Rebecca so you cannot be pushed out of the home you helped keep standing. Do not sign anything Grant or Tracy puts in front of you without Rebecca beside you. And Evie, if they try to make you sit behind the family, remember this. Family is not always the people in the first row. Sometimes it is the person who stayed after everyone else went home. Harold," the words blurred before I finished. I pressed the page flat with both hands because I refused to let my tears make it unreadable. For 4 years, I had told myself I did not need anyone to notice. I told myself care was not a performance. I told myself love did not keep score. But being unseen leaves bruises no one knows to ask about. And Harold had seen them. Across the table, Grant stared at the letter as if his father had reached out from the grave and put a hand on his shoulder. Tracy's mouth had gone pale. "That doesn't mean anything legally," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. Rebecca looked at her. "It means enough," she said. And legally, Harold was quite clear. Grant's head snapped up. "What does that mean?" "It means," Rebecca said, placing her briefcase on the table, "your father made arrangements to ensure Evelyn would not be removed from the house or pressured into waiving her interests during the funeral process. The details can be discussed later, in my office, with everyone properly represented." Tracy's face twisted. "He was sick. He was lucid," Rebecca said. "He had bad days. He also had very clear ones." Grant put both hands on the back of the chair in front of him. The chair that should have been mine. His knuckles whitened against the dark wood. "Dad wouldn't do this to me," he said. That was the first honest thing he had said all morning. Not Dad wouldn't protect Evelyn. Not Dad wouldn't know the truth. Only Dad wouldn't do this to me. I folded Harold's letter carefully and held it against my chest. "He didn't do this to you," I said. "He did this because of you." Grant looked at me then, and for a moment I saw the man I had married. Not the polished liar from the parking lot. Not the grieving son performing for relatives. Just a frightened, middle-aged man who had built his escape plan on the assumption that I would remain useful and quiet. "Dana doesn't mean anything," he said suddenly. The name landed in the room like another dropped glass. Tracy closed her eyes. Rebecca glanced at me, then looked away with professional mercy. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because after everything, Grant still thought the other woman was the center of the wound. It's not Dana, I said. His face crumpled with confusion. It's the fact that you stood in a funeral home and tried to make me sign away my life before your father was even buried. It's the fact that you called my care a convenience. It's the fact that you knew what I gave, and you still thought I would believe you if you sounded broken enough. He swallowed. I was overwhelmed. No, I said. Harold was overwhelmed when his hands stopped working. I was overwhelmed when I drove home from the hospital at midnight and still got up to make sure your shirt was clean for work. You were inconvenienced. Tracy's voice sharpened again, but weaker now. You are humiliating this family. I turned to her. You pulled my chair away. The room went still. I let the sentence sit there. Then I picked up the pen Grant had tried to put in my hand earlier. For a second, I watched him think I might sign after all. I saw the flicker of hope, quick and ugly. Instead, I placed the pen in front of him. Then I slipped off my wedding ring. I did not throw it. I did not slam it down. I laid it gently beside the unsigned papers, because some endings deserve quiet even when the people who caused them do not. Grant stared at it. Evelyn, he whispered. You wanted me in the second row, I said. My voice was steady now, steadier than I felt. So I'll sit there for the service if that keeps the peace for Harold. But I will not spend one more day in the second row of my own life. No one spoke. Then Mr. Morris stepped forward. With the same careful dignity he had shown all morning, he walked to the wall, took the chair Tracy had pulled away, and brought it back to the table. He did not make a speech. He simply placed it beside mine, where it should have been. That was what finally broke me. Not Grant. Not Tracy. Not the paperwork or Dana or the Dashcam. A stranger moving a chair back into place. I sat down because my knees gave out, and for the first time that morning, nobody told me where I belonged. The service began 20 minutes late. People noticed. Of course they did. Funeral homes are built from quiet, and quiet carries everything. I sat in the first row. Not because Tracy allowed it. Not because Grant apologized. Because Mr. Morris walked me there himself, and Rebecca sat directly behind me with Harold's envelope in her lap like a witness. Grant sat 2 seats away, hollow-eyed and silent. Tracy sat on his other side, her hands folded so tightly the skin over her knuckles shone. When the minister spoke of Harold's stubborn kindness, I thought of the Dashcam box on the kitchen table. When he spoke of loyalty, I thought of late-night pill bottles and the chipped coffee mug. When he said Harold believed family was shown in action, not claimed in words, I felt Grant turn his head toward me. I did not look back. After the burial, the rain stopped. The cemetery grass was soft beneath my heels. Mourners drifted toward their cars, speaking in low voices, hugging, promising casseroles and phone calls they might or might not remember. Grant approached me near the black SUV. For one bitter second, I almost smiled at the sight of it. The witness with windshield wipers. Can we talk? He asked. I looked at the dashcam mounted behind the mirror. We already did, I said. You just didn't know I was listening. His mouth opened, then closed. The old me would have filled the silence for him. Explained. Comforted. Offered a path back just to make the air less painful. I let the silence stand. That evening, I went home alone. The farmhouse was dark when I pulled into the driveway. For years, I had arrived exhausted, carrying grocery bags, pharmacy packets, folders, Harold's favorite soup from the diner in town. That night, I carried only his letter. The house smelled faintly of wood smoke and lemon cleaner. Harold's recliner sat by the window, the brown blanket folded over one arm. His chipped mug was still in the sink because I had not been able to wash it after he died. I stood in the living room for a long time. Then I took the funeral program from my purse and set it on the small table beside his chair. Beloved father, brother, and friend, it said. I touched Harold's picture. And witness, I whispered. The weeks that followed were not clean. People like to imagine dignity makes pain tidy. It does not. Grant sent long messages, then short ones, then flowers. Tracy sent one email that began with, "In the spirit of healing," and somehow blamed grief, confusion, and miscommunication before the second paragraph ended. Rebecca handled what needed handling. She never turned Harold's arrangements into drama. She simply made sure no one rushed me, just as he had asked. I changed the locks with proper notice. I packed Grant's things into boxes and labeled them without spite. I moved Harold's recliner to the front window where the morning sun came in strongest. On the first clear Saturday, I cleaned out the SUV and found the Dashcam manual still folded in the glove compartment, Harold's handwriting in the margin beside one setting. Keep audio on. I sat in the driver's seat and cried until the steering wheel blurred. Not because I wanted Grant back. Because Harold had known. Because someone had seen me before I knew how badly I needed to be seen. Spring came slowly to rural Pennsylvania. Mud first, then pale grass, then daffodils pushing up along the fence Harold had been meaning to repaint for 3 years. I started drinking coffee from the chipped mug. I took one room at a time and made it mine. Not by erasing Harold. Not by pretending those years had not happened. But by letting the house become a place where my name did not have to be defended. Sometimes, I still think about that chair. How small it was. How much it held. A chair can tell you where people think you belong. So can a signature line. So can a room full of relatives waiting to see whether you will make yourself smaller for their comfort. I spent years being useful enough to keep clothes, but not valued enough to protect. That ended in a funeral home, with rain on the windows, a dashcam recording, and a dead man's letter telling the truth better than the living did. If you have ever been treated like an outsider by the people you cared for the most, I hope this story reminds you of something important. Staying counts. Loving counts. Carrying the weight when no one claps still counts. And if someone keeps asking you to sit in the second row of your own life, maybe it is time to stand up, move the chair, and stop signing things just to keep the peace. Tell me where you're listening from, and if this story found you at the right time, stay with us for the next one. There are more honest stories ahead.